Okay, welcome everybody to another exciting, oh, hang on, there we are, another exciting town hall number 79. We are going to hand it over pretty quickly to our CTO, Maciek, who's going to take us through some exciting new improvements that's been going on at the low-level core side of the product. platformOS, of course, has moved away from the old way of doing things with file transfer protocol and moved to command line interface approach, which is what real developers use. And we have got some really great enhancements there. Colin, if you're able to just check on who's muted and who's not, I will actually make Maciek a co-host, of course, and then hand it over to you, Maciek. So hang on one sec, I forgot to do that earlier. Make you a co-host. Done. And so, yeah, we're going to go through a couple of enhancements that have been based on feedback from you, our channel partners. So thanks for that. Maciek, are you ready to rock and roll?
Yes.
Sound check. I'm going to stop sharing, give you the floor. Away you go.
Awesome. Thank you. Can you see my screen? Yes. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So I've created this beautiful website just for you to show it. It includes 2 pages, really. Well, 3, counting the homepage. The app directory is quite simple. We have one authorization policy, which I will use as an example. We have a file in a literally random dir to show you an improvement that we've made for well, reporting on files which were actually not a match to any converter. And we have 2 pages. We have the homepage and my page, which we'll use as example. To my page, the authorization policy, check my param, is connected. And what I would like to show you first is the optional name parameter in all resources. Authorization policy is just used as example. This actually, this is true for all resources like forms, emails, SMSs. So name parameter is now completely optional, and if it's absent in the file, then we will take it from the file name. And here you can see my page, which has this authorization policy set. And this is how currently the authorization policy looks. So it has the name, check my param, and then some liquid content. The problem with setting a name is that most of the time it duplicates the file name. So it's easy to make a typo, or even worse, if you just change it completely to something else like misleading name, and of course you have to do corresponding change to the page, then the problem arises that if another developer wants to edit your code and they want to quickly check what misleading name authorization policy is doing, and there are a lot of authorization policy in the code, then it might be quite hard to actually find the right one. Of course, you can try to find across the whole project and so on and so forth, but it's really tedious sometimes, especially if you are rushing or you just want to get an idea about the new project you've been assigned to. So that's why we went ahead, and you can now just completely delete this line, and it looks like this. So it looks much simpler, and it works exactly the same as previously with the name. So you can modify this file freely. So let's say we can change the required parameter from town hall to town hall 2. Then if you go to this page, obviously the authorization policy will kick in because the parameter is wrong, but if you make it correct, then the page works, and you can just keep editing it as the name parameter was there. So it just behaves the way you should expect. And again, this is the same for forms. This is the same for emails. So you don't need to type the same thing twice in the file name and the name. It's just once. Everything looks simpler, less code, and generally everyone should be happy with it. So this is one highlight of the recent changes. The other improvement we've made to pos-cli is how we handle the files which are in the wrong directories. So right now, when you try to sync a file, which is in the wrong directory, we display a meaningful error message saying which file was not synced, and with the link to documentation, which explains the whole structure, so you don't need to search it. So if you believe the directory is correct, but we think it's not, then you can double check and actually see our documentation. And this should save some time. Previously, of course, it behaved the way that it was just saying the file was synced, but nothing was happening. So if you had a small typo, then you could spend some time trying to figure out why it doesn't work, why it's not updating. And just after a moment, you realize, oh, the file is in the wrong directory. The other thing we've made recently is how we improved the way how we handle GraphQL queries. In order to do this, we had to add some warnings to the log files, and a lot of you have asked about it. That's why I decided to just quickly walk you through those warning messages. Some of you might have quite a lot of them, and I would like to explain why. So previously, the GraphQL queries were working the way that we were just taking the name from the query. So here you can see that I'm going to the page which invokes a GraphQL query, which is invoked as modules, my module list. And that was the old way of doing it. But actually, the file is not located in my modules. Modules, my module graph queries list. It's actually nested inside the user directory, but we're just skipping it completely until now. So this was causing some problems if you, for example, wanted to have a directory user, a directory project, a directory, I don't know, a product, for example, and all of them had a file named list, then you would get some validation error messages saying that the name list is already taken. So you had to actually prefix each GraphQL query with the user list, project list, even though they were already in the right directory. So we have changed it, and now the correct way of invoking this query would be just to include this nested user directory inside the name. And that's what warning is saying. So basically, to get rid of this error, all you need to do is to make sure that the full path is used, and you can just copy paste it from the warning message, correct it, and the warning will begin, and everything else will behave as normally. So it's a little bit inconvenience, probably because those warning messages are populated every time you go to the page, because that's the place where we actually parse and evaluate the actual Liquid code. But it's still backwards compatible. So if you don't want to take any action, you don't have to, but probably you should do anyway, because it's just more intuitive for the others and for yourself later. And another thing I would like to show you is how you can move the files, for example, from public directory to private, and also how you can easily change the directory from deprecated name like graph queries to GraphQL. Previously, it would be a pain and it would duplicate a lot of files. Right now, we do it seamlessly. So we detect that what you want to do is to rename the file, and we don't create duplicates. Here we change two things at once. So we change both the graph queries to GraphQL, which is the proper name, and not the deprecated graph queries. And we also change directory from public to private. So what should happen is that we actually shouldn't see the graph query returned by the GUI serve, because it's private, so no one should access it. So we'll just see that this actually happened. The graph query disappeared correctly. But if we wanted to get it back, so we could change the public file again, the directory from private to public again. And after deploying it, which takes just a few seconds, we should be able to see it back. And as you can see, the path has actually properly been changed to GraphQL from graph queries. So no duplicates in this scenario, and cleaner code base, and it will be easier to work. Yeah, and the very last thing I want to show you is that you can use now pos-cli pool. So I'm just showing Git right now, the output. So I will just revert back all my changes and make sure it's clean. I will remove the app directory and I will recreate it using pos-cli pull command. So pos-cli pull will just download the app folder. It will not download modules. After a couple seconds, it will create the app zip file, which should include all the files that are currently on staging. So it's really reverse of deploy. And what's great about it is that it will include the minimal amount of code to make it work. So all the default settings are skipped. And when we compare the version of the initial version of the code with what pos-cli has returned, we'll see that actually things like name, which is not necessary because it's actually, that's the default name. This would be the name which would be created if this property wouldn't be set. We just don't include it. So it's actually a quick way how you can make sure that you get rid of all default values, which are not necessary to be explicitly set. And it sorts your properties alphabetically. And also it makes sure that YAML best practices are preserved. So in this scenario, the initial file included 2 spaces for array elements, but actually YAML specification says that even though it's possible, you shouldn't add any spaces. So it's removed any unnecessary white space characters as well. And if you wanted to download a module, there is another command. So you can pull any module you want by using pos-cli modules pull staging and then the module name, where staging, of course, is the environment you want to use. And similarly to the pos-cli pull, it will create a file. It's called modules, although with -p parameter, you can name it whatever you want. And it will include the module files. Of course, only the public ones. The private files will not be included because they are private. And that's pretty much it. This was the highlight of our recent changes to pos-cli. And there's actually one more thing that I will show later on, but maybe you have some questions first.
Yeah, good stuff, Maciek. Who's got a nice curly question for Maciek?
I do. So with the renaming of the graph queries to include the path, you mentioned that it's probably a good idea to migrate them to the new way of doing it instead of just referencing the name of the graph query. You say that it's going to be like deprecated, but still available. Is there a time limit for that? Do we have to go into our older sites and update all of them? Or is that just something we shouldn't have to worry about? And once it's set in the past, we can just leave it that way?
Well, so for now, we don't have any specific timeline of deprecation, but before removing this, we'll for sure give at least a couple of months notice that we are planning to remove the old compatibility behavior. But for now, it has not been announced.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Good question.
Can you
so how does the oh, sorry, Daniel, go mate.
Here's a curly question. Can you guys do that for us automatically? Because if you've got the name in there and it knows where it's collecting it from anyway, is there a way that that can be automated out so that it can?
We could, but what about your GitHub repo that's got it all there and we don't have access to it, and then suddenly you're doing a merge and it's broken? So you'd want to make sure that your source control has the absolute source of truth. So giving warnings, and we can say, hey, these sites, we recommend you change and update. Here's an audit of them. That way you could do it at your code source.
I was just thinking because of the way that pull does it, when pull pulls it back down and removes some of the names and things like that, or some of the stuff that's not meant to be there. But yeah, no, that's cool.
Sorry, I didn't get it. Could you say it once again?
Well, when you're talking about when we use pull, it brings down the bare minimum code, so it removes some of the stuff that we don't need. So that's when I was wondering if it was possible that at that same time, if you did a pull to do that, that it would change the names or the file, the directory where it lives, to the full file path.
Well, but if I understood correctly, we cannot really change the names because the names are referenced by other entities, right? So, for example, in authorization policy has a name which then is referenced in the page. So in page you specify the name of authorization policy you want to use. So the
Yeah, it would be.
If there's a difference between name, one we want to derive from the physical file path, and the actual name you have set, then we would have we would just break your settings, right? So this probably is more a task for poscli itself, like to do it on the client side. So maybe some kind of parser or something, but the poll just shows you the existing state of the database and in an as minimal form as needed. Does it answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, that's cool.
So I got a question, Maciek. How do you magically in the background know if it's a renamed file or a moved from one folder to another? Is there some kind of manifest that's being kept in an audit that's compared against?
We have two things. So there are two scenarios. You can either change the physical file path. I mean, there are three scenarios, but we support two scenarios. So one scenario is that you change physical file path, but you have but the name is explicitly set. In this scenario, we behind the scenes, we check if the file with this physical file path exists, and we strip down all the directories. So we don't care if the file is inside form configurations or forms or in graph queries or GraphQL. We know this is graph query, so we just get what's the most important. So relative path to the directory which specify which file is it. And then if the file doesn't exist, but it has defined name, then we try to find the resource with this name. And if it exists, then we assume, okay, you just wanted to move this resource to another location, but you don't want to actually remove it or anything like this. So we will keep it. And that's how we know that this is just renaming. The other scenario is that you change the name, for example. So you have name ABC and you want to change it to XYZ, but the physical file path doesn't change. This way we use the path to find the resource, so there's no problem. The scenario which we don't support is where you change the file path and the name at the same time, because from our perspective it's just completely the new file. So in this scenario, the old resource will be deleted and the new one will be created.
Gotcha. Good stuff. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? No? Well, it sounds like you'll be able to jump in and give us that go over with the, is it the pos-cli 5 gig asset file upload?
Yeah, something like this.
Something like that? Good.
Okay, so one more thing that you can try yourself. It's not a default yet. Right now, with the newest version of pos-cli, which is currently 4.4.11, still the assets are part of the regular deploy. So there is 50 megabyte limit for both assets and whatever is in app and modules folders. But there is a flag called -d, which stands for direct S3 upload, which means that all the assets will be separately uploaded to S3 first, bypassing our service completely. And the limit for this is actually what AWS limits. So it's a lot of gigabytes for files instead of just 50 megabytes. And the 50 megabytes limit would be just for the files, for the configuration, so for app and modules. And you will know that it works because the output is different. You can see that it says deploying resources to, and this is the host, so corresponding to staging, and then there is uploading assets, whereas in the regular deploy, the output looks like this. We will make it a default in the next release. For now, it's default in the beta, but if you wanted to give it a go and see how it works for you, all you need to do is just use -d flag, and it will use the direct S3. way of uploading the assets.
So if someone's building a site and their CSS, JavaScript, image assets, configuration files are more than 5 gig, I'm guessing it's going to be a pretty beefy kind of website. Lots of thick, unoptimized images and videos.
We take per file. It's limited.
Per file. So you could do your 1 terabyte site deploy with multiple 5 gig zip uploads.
Probably would need to double check on AWS documentation if they allow such files, but it's just that previously we had 50 megabytes limits for everything. Right now we just upload directly to S3, and S3 is capable of storing really a lot of files. So we should be in much better shape. So this limit was usually hit if you had a lot of PDFs, for example, or some other assets that you wanted to have as part of assets directory.
Awesome. So we won't have any complaints now around I need more space for my website assets. Totally handled, and it will handle en masse in scale, so much better than FTP. So for those wondering why don't we use FTP, old way of doing things just to move files up and down, command line interfaces are so much more flexible. In fact, FTP is a command line interface tool. You go to the console. Most people have a client GUI where they drag and drop, but it's a command at the DOS prompt or at the Linux prompt or the Mac OS prompt. So you can use FTP as a protocol to move files. It's a command line interface, but it's very, very, very narrow in what it does. The POS command line interface tool does asset uploads, it does code deploy, it does tons of different things, and that's what all the flags do. So for those wondering, why don't we support FTP? Well, we do. It's called pos-cli. You can move assets up there far more effectively than old SFTP, but you can do so much more with it as well. So just a little explanation for those that have wondered about that. Old way of doing things, new and right way of doing things, command line interface. And then we've got people building GUIs on the top of that as well. So for those who want drag and drop, watch this space. All right, any questions, feedback? While you've got Maciek, you might as well throw some curly ones.
Speaking of assets, do you think we could get audio file support at some point, say for like notification sounds, if someone gets a message?
I think that's definitely something we can sanitize. MP3s, WAVs.
Yeah, that kind of file.
So short answer, yes, we can.
That'd be useful.
Just send in a request to support@jj.com, support@platformOS.com, and we'll get that sorted out in the queue.
Cool, will do.
And video. What about large video with new, larger file sizes? Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why we can't put anything and everything up there. Of course, what will then start to impact is on the various plans that you've got. You'll start to eat up storage, eat up streaming, bandwidth, and other things. So maybe checking what hosting plan the client's on before going crazy with all that sort of stuff. But yes, yep, take advantage of whatever S3 restrictions have, which are pretty much unlimited for most websites, and then making sure that the client is ready to pay for the storage and the streaming side of it. Any other questions? Feedback? Thanks, Maciek. That was great, mate.
Sure. So as a last thing, I may want to share like what next in our roadmap. So what are the other areas we are planning to improve? So the very next thing we would like to do is to handle image and attachments upload, because we got feedback from you that it's still confusing and we would like to simplify it. So a lot of changes are coming there. We're working on flattening the structure, making it simpler, We currently have a couple ways of doing things. So usually in such scenarios, what you do is that you create yet another one in the hope that it will be much better than the others. And that's exactly what we plan to do. But at the same time, we'll deprecate the others, properly annotate them. So you wouldn't need to wonder which option should I use, because the new one that we create will be, well, much simpler than everything we've got so far, and yet it will use the DirectS3 approach as well. So stay tuned for it. And other thing, what we will do is to give you access to the new import-export interfaces in GraphQL or endpoint. So our current version of import and export, most of the time it works nice, but it has some issues that were fixed in the version 2. And that's what we would like to give you access to as soon as possible. So you will be able to import and export a lot of data very, very quickly, as I mentioned in previous town hall. Yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Maciek. So did someone have another question? No? Well, thank you very much, everybody. A bit more of a technical town hall this time around. We will be as we're putting some of the finishing touches on to some of these new adjustments to the core, where, as Maciek said, we're deprecating a few things, we're putting in friendly warnings, we're going to give you plenty of time to adjust. We're optimizing uploads for DirectS3, so you've got literally unlimited upload capabilities. And as that's finalized, we're just going to be pumping out lots and lots of video content to make it easy for you and your staff as you bring on more developers to your agencies, for them to get up to speed and apply best practices. So thank you, Maciek, again for jumping in, staying late, and for everybody else who's staying up late wherever you are. Hope you're all staying well and healthy as well. We're again lucky to be in an industry where our skills work well remotely. If you missed out on last town hall, go and check it out. We shared a really comprehensive flow of how we work virtually and the tools we use, and that was really cool to get people's feedback on how they found that useful. And hopefully we'll get some great feedback on how you're finding all these enhancements that Maciek and the core team are deploying as well. We'll see you on Slack, and I'll have this video uploaded shortly. We'll see you at the next town hall and see you in Slack in the meantime. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.